Hi, folks. This is Aaron Anderson, and I am coming to you today from Peace, Love, and Hippiness. This is a story about a person that goes by the name of Brian Miller, who is a petition coordinator. Back when I first got into the political work and doing petitioning and political activism, the campaign season in Colorado had just ended, and we received our final pay. And I met this guy named Brian Miller at the office, and he was talking a bunch of big talk, and you know, um, he took me out to the bar, and I had paid for us to have a couple pitchers of beer, and we played some pool, and he had talked and did a lot of sweet talking, and told me, "Hey, come to New York with me, and um, you'll be making $500, maybe $1,000 a day." I had heard about this in this industry where it was possible to get on such great campaigns. So, I kind of fell for it. And this was back in 2010. And there really was no other jobs around the nation as far as I knew. So I took Brian Miller and his friend Drew Hutchinson back, and we stayed the night in my RV because he had no money. I don't know why, because the season just ended and everybody else made decent money. And so basically, his deal was if I footed the bill for me, Brian, and Drew to make it out to New York and used my money as expense money to get us out there, he was going to give me a great job in New York, and it was going to be a great campaign. And I was really excited. I had never been to New York before, always wanted to go. So I jumped on board, and that morning we got up. I was so excited to get on the road, and he told me to come over to his vehicle that was parked down the road, and I got in, and I had noticed that there was a window missing, and I was wondering why I couldn't roll up the passenger side window. And Brian Miller had told me that he got the car in a drug deal that had gone bad, and somebody got killed in the car, or some outlandish, ridiculous story he told me. And so, that kind of freaked me out a little bit, but we were already on the road for a good bit of time when he had told me that story. And then all of a sudden, our car broke down in Elkhart, Indiana, of all places, in the middle of nowhere. Just clunk, 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 boom, not running. So we found a hotel for the night and left the car by the side of the road. And Brian Miller and Drew Hutchinson, they were big drinkers, and they had no money. So they kind of, in a not so nice, but, persuasive, manipulating fashion, manipulated me into going to the store and getting some alcohol for them because they had just ran out of beer. So we were walking down the road because our car had been broken down, and we were going to get some alcohol. And made it to the gas station. On our way back, we were walking through an auto parts store parking lot, and the police roll up, and they're like, "Hold it right there, put your hands in the air," the whole drill. They asked for all of our IDs, and they told us that there had been local police reports in that area where stores had recently been robbed. So they made up some extravagant story, the police did, of why they wanted our IDs and why they were stopping us in the first place when we were just walking down the road, not doing anything wrong. So I gave him my ID, and Drew Hutchinson gave his ID. He had an ID from Hawaii, and Brian Miller had no ID. Imagine that. no money, no ID. And however, Brian Miller gave them his real name and date of birth, and they looked him up, and imagine that. Brian Miller had a warrant out for his arrest, and they took him to jail. So me and Drew went back to the hotel room, drank some beers, and I guess Drew Hutchinson barely knew Brian Miller. He was kind of being conned into this whole trip just as I was, and we sat around all night just talking, staying up late. We were trying to figure out, what Drew was arrested for, what Brian was arrested for, if it was something bad, or, we were really freaked out. Broken down car and Brian in jail. So anyway, we got up in the morning, decided, instead of fixing the car and carrying on ourselves, because we were kind of new in the business. Brian had the contact to the supposed bosses of the campaign. We would go to the jail and bail Brian out. Anyway, we get to the jail, and it's really weird because there's little horse and buggy tie-ups out in front of the jail in Amish country out there in Elkhart, Indiana. And we go and ask the jail how much is Brian's bond, and it was going to be like $300 and some dollars. And so we started making all the phone calls to any person that we could possibly think of to try to get this $300. And we finally got the money, and we came back to the jail to bail Brian out. And I was almost flat out of money anyway, but we came up with $300 and some dollars to bail him out. And then Brian comes waltzing out of the front of the jail. And he's like, "Oh, they just let me out. The warrant for my arrest was like 20 years old, and the judge who had issued it was already dead, so they just let me out on a technicality." And so I'm like, wow, great. Thank goodness we didn't have to use this money. So I kept hold of the money that came from my parents, because I was almost out of expense money myself. And we made it to New York, and Brian Miller was very secretive about these bosses who were running the campaign. I didn't know much at all. I was still kind of a newbie in the whole political thing. Anyway, so we met up with the bosses, and Brian Miller made me stay in the car so I couldn't see their faces, I couldn't talk to them. He kind of did it in a very threatening manner. He's a very controlling and manipulative person. And so after we got the petitions, we had to go make copies and get material to make for the boards. So we went to a Staples, I believe it was, where Brian Miller proceeded to make copies of the petition and gather materials for our work, which I was about to go walk up to the register and pay for, but Brian Miller is like, no, just follow me. He walks out the door and steals the materials. So anyway, we go and work that day at a festival, and then I think it was the corn festival in Hamburg, and I had met this girl that was kind of cute, and I was interested in and wanted to get to know. And I called her up and I told her, hey, yeah, let's go out and get a drink at the bar or something. And so me and the girl went out to the bar, and we both had one drink, and turns out she was the sheriff's daughter of the county where we were staying in. And I invited her after the bar to come hang out back at my hotel, because I didn't really drink, not anything like Brian Miller or Drew Hutchinson. They were complete alcoholics. On top of that, they also get angry and violent while they're drunk. So I told Drew and Brian Miller on the phone that I was coming back to the hotel, because we were all three of us splitting a hotel, I told him that, I bought the hotel and I wanted to hang out with the girl in the hotel room and watch some TV or something. And so they agreed to leave for a little bit. And me and the girl got back there, and they had taken some of the beers away that I had bought for them earlier. And me and the girl were hanging out, and then I don't know, 20 minutes later or something like that, knock, 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 loud pounding on the door. Um, Brian Miller is, knocking at the door, and I'm open the door, and I'm like, "Hey, man, what's up? I was, I, you just left. What's going on?" And so he basically started threatening me and scaring the girl off, and he was threatening to basically beat me up if I didn't leave. And this was the last bit of money I had used to get that hotel. The last bit of my expense money. The last night hotel we got before we got paid. And so he started in a threatening manner, threatening to beat me up and tossing all of my stuff out of the hotel room. I immediately called 911 and told 911 what had been transpiring, that Brian Miller was threatening to beat me up and throwing all my stuff out of my hotel room. And the cops come and arrive, and the sheriff's daughter, I don't remember her name, she had run off somewhere, gotten scared, and I was trying to beg her to wait around and talk to the police or give me a ride somewhere to get me somewhere safe, because I really had nowhere to go and no money left. But she ran off, and so did Brian Miller and Drew Hutchinson. So anyway, I'm sitting there talking to the cops, telling them that Brian Miller and Drew Hutchinson are drunk, and they're like, "So what? We like drunk people here in New York." And I said, "Well, they're trying to get violent with me, and they were threatening me, and they were tossing all my stuff out of my hotel room." And they're like, "We like violent people in New York. Tell us something we don't know." And so I said, "Well, they told me this weird this story about the car that they're driving that was out of a drug deal gone bad, and someone got murdered in the car. How about that?" And they're like, okay, they start running the license plate, and turns out that the car comes up as a stolen car. So they're like, okay, in their New York accents, can you get these guys for us? I was like, sure. So I started texting Brian, and they I was like, I think one of them went back in the hotel room, and they went and got someone and opened up the hotel room, put Drew in handcuffs right away. And I was still texting Brian, and I was like, "You want Brian Miller too?" I texted him, I was like, "Hey, look, your buddy Drew's over here in handcuffs, and the cops need you to straighten out this story and tell them what's going on." And Brian Miller comes running out of the bushes. And comes up, and the cops arrest him too, take them both to jail for stolen vehicle. And so they're gone, and gone to jail. And the remaining cop, I was trying to tell him, "Look, all my stuff's in the hotel room, and I need to get in there and get my stuff." Well, I had given Brian Miller the money to rent the hotel room, so Brian had put the hotel room in his name, and the hotel room wasn't even in my name, even though I paid for it. And the cops had told me, "No, everything in there is evidence. You don't get nothing." And I was like, "Well, look, officer, I gotta get my wallet and my phone." And they said, "No, you get nothing." And I was like, "Well, let me at least get my, they said, you got anything with your name on it in there? I was like, yeah, my wallet will have my name on it. And so they let me in. I got my wallet, and my Bible had my name on it. They wouldn't even let me take a hat or anything, or any other of my clothes or any of my stuff. And they're like, okay, now it's time to get walking. If we catch you on this property again, we're gonna trespass you. So, and then the cop speeds off, and then the cop comes back around to me, and he's like, you know what, Aaron? I'll do you a favor. I'll drive you downtown, Buffalo. Because in the country out here, it's not good to be homeless and walking around. So I'll take you to a homeless shelter. So I was like, okay, well, it beats being out here in the country. Maybe the homeless shelter would take me in. I didn't know. I was just kind of a young kid, 25 years old at the time. And so I took a ride, and the cop, blasted his loud rock music all the way downtown Buffalo, 40 minutes away. And we got down there, and the cop dropped me off near a homeless shelter, and I rang the doorbell after the cop had left, and no answer. And at I don't know, it was 2 a.m., 3 a.m., something like that, really late. And so I decided to, my next best move is probably the emergency room at the hospital. I figured, well, maybe I can go stay there since it's cold out, and I can, stay there till dawn, have somewhere safe to go. I had known nothing about this city, Buffalo. And so I stayed in the emergency room, and then I got up, and the sun came up, and I was walking around Buffalo, just, all confused. I'd been up for 24 hours already, maybe longer. And some person at the train station gave me a few minutes to use their phone, and I called my mom and dad and told them what's up, and I was like, well, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'll call you back when I figure it out. And I came up with the idea. I found a taxi driver that would take a credit card over the phone, and I called my parents back up, and they bought me a taxi with a credit card over the phone. Thank God I found this guy, and he drove me all the way back out to Hamburg. And while I'm going out there, I'm telling the taxi driver everything that happened, and that basically I'm gonna have to get a key from the front desk lobby of this hotel and go in there and basically steal my stuff back that was mine. And I was trying to get him prepared, because I told him, if the cops saw me on the property anymore, they were going to trespass me and arrest me or something. So I went into the front lobby, got the key card renewed. They didn't really ask any questions, and I rushed to the hotel, and the taxi driver got out of his seat and helped me run in and out and grab a bunch of bags of stuff and pile them in there, and we sped off out of that parking lot. And I really hadn't thought out my next plan of action. And the taxi driver, he had a cross hanging around his rearview mirror, and he's like, you know what, I believe in God. I'll take you back downtown for free, because you look better walking around homeless down there than you would anywhere else. So the taxi driver drove me back downtown Buffalo, where I basically was dropped off at the train station, and the transit center gave me a couple of trash bags to put all my stuff in, and I then continued to walk around Buffalo to try to figure things out. And I finally got to a car rental place that would take a credit card over the phone, so my parents were able to buy me a rental car. And I told my parents I would keep working on this campaign, try to get back in contact with the bosses, and make the money to pay for the rental car, and keep working on the campaign. And the two bosses of the campaign told me that 4 days later, after all this had transpired, Drew and Brian were released from jail by the judge. I had no idea why they would be released. I'm like, oh, they got a stolen car. You know, New York's pretty tough on crime like that. I didn't figure they'd be released that soon. However, they were released, and the bosses were telling me, oh, they're on this side of the town. Brian Miller is threatening he wants to bash your head into the sidewalk and curb check you and knock out all your teeth and kill you. Telling me all these things that Brian Miller was going to do to me because I got him arrested for the stolen car thing. Well, if Brian Miller hadn't been a drunk alcoholic that's angry and raging and really stupid and threatening me in the first place, none of this would have happened. But, he used me for my expense money to get to New York. He stole stuff from stores. He's basically a con man. So if you ever come in contact with Brian Miller, steer clear of him.